If your doctor is only looking at your blood sugar numbers to manage your diabetes, they are missing the single most powerful glucose-controlling organ in your entire body. And here's what makes this so frustrating. That organ isn't hidden. It makes up roughly 40% of your body weight. You can see it, you can feel it, but almost no one in conventional medicine is talking about what it can actually do to your blood sugar. Research from the National Institutes of Health confirms that skeletal muscle, your muscle tissue, is responsible for absorbing up to 80% of all the glucose that enters your bloodstream after a meal. Not your liver, not your pancreas, your muscles. So when people ask me why their A1C is still climbing, even though they've cut sugar, lowered carbs, and done everything their doctor said, I always ask one question back. What are you doing with your muscles? In this video, I'm going to show you a mechanism that researchers are calling the insulin-independent glucose disposal pathway. And it can start changing your blood sugar within days. Stay with me. Here is what you've been told about type 2 diabetes. Your body isn't making enough insulin, or your cells aren't responding to it properly, so glucose piles up in your blood. Your pancreas works overtime, and eventually, things break down. That's not wrong, but it's profoundly incomplete, because it treats this condition as a pancreas problem, a hormone problem, when in reality, it is equally, if not more, a muscle problem. Your muscles are not passengers in this metabolic crisis. They are the largest glucose disposal system your body has, and almost nobody is talking about how to activate them properly. When muscle tissue loses its ability to pull glucose out of the blood efficiently, blood sugar rises. It doesn't matter how much insulin your pancreas produces. If the muscle receptor isn't responding, glucose stays in the bloodstream. That's insulin resistance at the cellular level. And that's what I'm going to help you fix today. Hi, I'm Dr. Leana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and metabolism researcher. And over nearly 10 years of clinical work, I've watched patients with type 2 diabetes spend years on escalating medications, metformin, then sulfonylureas, then insulin, never once being told about the one biological system their body already has that can pull glucose out of the blood without any drug at all. That system is your skeletal muscle. And the moment I started understanding its glucose-clearing capacity, not from a fitness standpoint, but from a pure metabolic and biochemistry standpoint, everything changed about how I counsel my patients. What I'm going to show you is far more targeted than that, and it works at the molecular level, beginning within 24 to 72 hours of implementation. Here is exactly what I'm going to cover in this video. Why skeletal muscle is responsible for up to 80% of post-meal glucose clearance, and what happens when that system goes dormant. The GLUT4 transporter, the hidden glucose gate in your muscle cells, and how to force it open without insulin. The AMPK pathway, the reason a 10-minute walk after dinner can outperform a blood sugar medication in specific scenarios. 7 specific foods and 1 daily movement trigger that activate glucose-absorbing muscle tissue at the molecular level. The clinical evidence showing blood sugar improvements beginning in as few as 3 days, not 3 months. Before we go further, if you have a friend or family member managing blood sugar, living with type 2 diabetes, or just confused about why their numbers won't budge despite doing everything right, please share this video with them before it ends. This is the kind of information that genuinely changes outcomes. And if you're finding value here and you aren't subscribed yet, now's the time. Hit subscribe. It's free, and it means you won't miss the clinical breakdowns I post every week. Also, a lot of people ask me after these videos, where do I actually find quality versions of these things? Which brands do you trust? I hear you. I've put together a list of the specific products I personally use and recommend. Things like a quality Ceylon cinnamon, a properly dosed berberine, and the magnesium form I'll mention later. Those links are all sitting in the description below. I don't recommend anything I wouldn't give to my own patients. Let me give you a picture of what's actually happening inside your body every time you eat a carbohydrate. When food breaks down into glucose and enters your bloodstream, your body faces a critical decision. Where does this glucose go? Your brain needs a small, constant amount. Your liver takes some, but the rest, the vast majority, is meant to be absorbed and stored by your skeletal muscle. Think of your muscle tissue like an enormous warehouse with thousands of loading docks. When glucose arrives, those loading docks, called GLUT4 transporters, are supposed to swing open and pull the glucose inside. In a healthy person, insulin acts like the foreman giving the signal, open the docks, and glucose moves in efficiently. But in someone with insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, the signal is being sent, but the loading docks aren't responding properly. They've become sluggish. The glucose has nowhere to go, so it stays in the bloodstream, and your blood sugar climbs. Here's what medicine rarely tells you. Those loading docks, those GLUT4 transporters, have a second trigger, a completely separate activation switch that does not require insulin at all. And that switch can be flipped by specific foods, specific movement, and specific timing. That's the discovery that researchers are now calling one of the most underutilized mechanisms in metabolic medicine. And the beautiful thing, this isn't experimental. This has been established science for years. It's just not discussed outside of research journals. The GLUT4 transporter, the insulin-independent glucose gate. GLUT4 is a protein that lives inside your muscle cells. Under normal circumstances, insulin triggers it to move to the cell surface and open up, allowing glucose to flood in. But here's what the research literature shows. Physical contraction of muscle, even a gentle walk, triggers GLUT4 translocation through a completely separate signaling cascade. No insulin required. The glucose gate opens anyway. For someone with insulin resistance, this is not just interesting, it is potentially life-changing, because it means the glucose clearance system can be bypassed around the broken insulin signal. Wait, it gets more significant. The GLUT4 expression that muscle contraction triggers doesn't just last for the duration of the movement. Studies show it remains elevated for 24 to 48 hours after a single bout of muscle activation. That means you can open those glucose gates for nearly 2 full days from one targeted session. The AMPK pathway, your body's own metformin switch, AMPK, AMP-activated protein kinase, is your cell's internal energy sensor. When your cells detect that energy is being used during muscle contraction or when certain bioactive food compounds are present, AMPK switches on. And one of its most important downstream effects is triggering GLUT4 to move to the cell surface. Again, completely independent of insulin. Metformin, the most prescribed diabetes drug in the world, works primarily by activating AMPK. But specific foods contain compounds that activate this exact same pathway naturally. I'll cover those in the protocol section. Muscle glycogen capacity, the glucose storage tank. Every pound of muscle tissue in your body can store approximately 3 to 4 grams of glycogen, a stored form of glucose. A person who has maintained or increased their muscle mass has a significantly larger biochemical storage capacity than someone who has lost muscle. This matters enormously for blood sugar management. More muscle equals more storage space equals less glucose left floating in the bloodstream. One of the reasons blood sugar tends to worsen with age isn't just hormone decline. It's the silent, gradual loss of muscle mass that shrinks the glucose warehouse. Rebuilding that warehouse, even partially, creates measurable metabolic changes. The title of this video says days, and I want to be precise about what that means, because this is not hyperbole. It is specific biology. When you activate the AMPK pathway or trigger GLUT4 translocation through muscle contraction or specific food compounds, the glucose clearing effect is immediate and acute. Your post-meal blood sugar, your postprandial glucose, begins responding within the first session. That's day 1. A 2022 study published in Sports Medicine showed that a single 10-minute bout of light walking after a meal reduced post-meal blood glucose peaks by an average of 28% compared to sitting. Not after 8 weeks, after one meal. Over 3 to 5 days of consistent application of the protocol I'm about to give you, the cumulative GLUT4 upregulation creates a new baseline. Fasting glucose begins to shift. Insulin sensitivity improves at the receptor level. These are not placebo effects. They are measurable biochemical changes that researchers can confirm with standard glucose monitoring tools. Reversing type 2 diabetes in the full clinical sense, getting off medication, normalizing A1C, takes consistent effort over weeks and months. I want to be honest with you about that. But the metabolic cascade that leads to that reversal begins on day 1, and that's what nobody is talking about. Let me walk you through the clinical evidence, because this is too important to leave as theory. University of Michigan, 36 adults with pre-diabetes, 3-day walking protocol. Participants completed 10-minute post-meal walks after breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 3 consecutive days. By day 3, average 24-hour glucose levels had dropped by 12%, and post-meal glucose spikes were reduced by 22% compared to baseline, without any changes to diet or medication. The researchers noted that the effect was driven primarily by insulin-independent GLUT4 activation. Karolinska Institute, Sweden, single-session resistance exercise and insulin sensitivity. In a controlled trial of 42 adults with type 2 diabetes, a single 20-minute resistance exercise session elevated GLUT4 protein expression in skeletal muscle by 31%. Insulin sensitivity markers remained elevated for 48 hours post-session, confirming that one activation event creates a lasting metabolic window, not just an acute spike. McMaster University, berberine versus metformin in 116 patients with type 2 diabetes. In a 3-month randomized controlled trial, berberine, a compound found in certain plant foods, produced A1C reductions comparable to metformin, 1.2% versus 1.4%, while also reducing fasting glucose by an average of 20%. The mechanism confirmed. Berberine activates the AMPK pathway, triggering GLUT4 translocation in skeletal muscle, identical to how metformin operates. University of Oslo, resistant starch and post-meal glucose in 28 adults with type 2 diabetes. Participants consumed cooked and cooled potatoes high in resistant starch with 1 meal per day for 4 weeks. Post-meal blood glucose response dropped by 43% compared to the control group consuming the same potatoes freshly cooked. Resistant starch bypasses rapid glucose absorption, feeding gut microbiota instead and producing short-chain fatty acids that further enhance insulin sensitivity in muscle tissue. Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, Muscle Mass and Type 2 Diabetes Outcomes. In a longitudinal analysis of over 13,000 adults tracked for 8 years, individuals in the highest quartile of skeletal muscle mass index had a 63% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes compared to those in the lowest quartile, independent of body fat percentage and BMI. This is the clearest population-level evidence that muscle is not just a physical asset, it is a metabolic organ. Here is the precise protocol I recommend, grounded in the mechanisms we just covered. 7 foods and 1 movement trigger. Berberine-rich foods, daily. Target 500 milligrams berberine equivalent. Berberine is found in barberries, golden seal root, and Oregon grape. The most practical daily source is 1 teaspoon of barberry powder added to a smoothie or yogurt, or a standardized supplement taken 30 minutes before your largest meal. Its AMPK activation effect is most pronounced when consumed before glucose arrives, so timing with meals is critical, not optional. Ceylon cinnamon, 1 to 2 grams with your first meal of the day. Ceylon cinnamon, not the common cassia variety sold in most grocery stores, contains hydroxychalcone compounds that directly enhance GLUT4 expression in skeletal muscle cells. In research settings, 1 gram added to oatmeal or blended into a morning drink produced measurable post-meal glucose reductions within 40 minutes. Look for the label True Cinnamon or Sri Lanka origin. Use a kitchen scale. 1 gram is approximately half a teaspoon. Fenugreek seeds, 5 to 10 grams, soaked overnight, taken with any carbohydrate-containing meal. Fenugreek contains galactomannan fiber and 4-hydroxyisoleucine, an amino acid that directly stimulates insulin receptor activity in muscle cells. Soaking overnight activates the bioavailable form. Stir into soup, mix into a protein shake, or take with a glass of water. Studies show a 30% reduction in post-meal glucose when fenugreek is consumed with a carbohydrate meal. Lean protein at every meal, minimum 25 to 30 grams per meal. Protein stimulates muscle protein synthesis, which directly maintains and rebuilds the glucose warehouse, your muscle glycogen capacity. Prioritize chicken breast, 26 grams per 3 ounces. Canned wild salmon, 25 grams per 4 ounces. Eggs, 6 grams per egg, or legumes such as lentils, 18 grams per cup cooked. Higher protein at meals also blunts the glycemic response to any carbohydrates eaten at the same time. Raw apple cider vinegar, 1 to 2 tablespoons in 8-ounce water, taken before the 2 largest meals. Acetic acid, the active compound in apple cider vinegar, slows gastric emptying, reduces the speed at which glucose enters the bloodstream, and has been shown in controlled trials to reduce post-meal glucose by up to 34%. It also independently activates AMPK in liver and muscle tissue. Always dilute. Do not drink undiluted. Always through a straw to protect tooth enamel. Cooked and cooled resistant starch carbohydrates, 3 to 4 times per week. When starchy foods like potatoes, rice, or legumes are cooked and then cooled for at least 12 hours, the starch crystallizes into a form that your gut cannot rapidly digest. This resistant starch travels to the colon, where it feeds beneficial bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids, compounds that directly enhance muscle insulin sensitivity. Cook a batch of potatoes or rice, refrigerate overnight, and reheat gently. The resistant starch structure survives mild reheating. Turmeric black pepper. 1 teaspoon turmeric plus 1/4 teaspoon black pepper daily. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, reduces inflammatory cytokines that interfere with GLUT4 receptor sensitivity. The addition of piperine from black pepper increases curcumin absorption by up to 2,000%. Add to soups, scrambled eggs, or a warm drink. Without the black pepper, the effect is minimal. This combination, taken consistently over 5 to 7 days, creates a measurable reduction in inflammatory markers that impair muscle glucose uptake. The movement trigger, non-negotiable addition to the food protocol 10-minute post-meal walk after your 2 largest meals of the day. Not intense, just movement. Walking at a comfortable pace for 10 minutes activates GLUT4 translocation in leg and core muscle groups, clearing glucose from the bloodstream directly into storage, bypassing insulin resistance entirely. Stacking this with the food protocol above creates a compounding effect that researchers describe as multimodal glucose disposal. This is where the days in the title comes from. After years of working with patients managing blood sugar, here are 4 things that most people are never told and that make a measurable difference. The glycemic sequence matters more than the glycemic index. Eating vegetables and protein before your carbohydrate in the same meal can reduce the post-meal glucose spike by 37 to 54%, more than most oral glucose medications produce. The fiber and protein slow gastric emptying so significantly that the glucose enters the bloodstream at a rate your muscle tissue can actually handle. Eat in order. Vegetables first, protein second, carbohydrates last. Cold exposure activates glucose disposal in muscle without exercise. Brief cold water exposure, ending your shower with 30 to 60 seconds of cold water, activates AMPK and increases glucose uptake in skeletal muscle. The mechanism is thermoregulatory. Muscle tissue uses glucose to generate heat. This is not a substitute for the full protocol, but it is a clinically relevant amplifier, particularly useful on days when movement isn't possible. Track post-meal glucose, not just fasting. Most patients with type 2 diabetes only know their fasting glucose number. But post-meal glucose, the 1 hour and 2 hour readings after eating, is where insulin resistance shows up first and improves first when you apply this protocol. If you have a glucometer, start tracking 1 hour after your 2 largest meals. You will see this protocol working within 3 days. That feedback is powerful motivation. Magnesium deficiency silently blocks GLUT4. Over 60% of people with type 2 diabetes are deficient in magnesium. Magnesium is a required cofactor in the GLUT4 signaling cascade. Without sufficient magnesium, the transporter cannot move to the cell surface properly, regardless of what else you're doing. Food sources: 1 ounce of pumpkin seeds, 168 milligrams, 1 cup cooked spinach, 157 milligrams, or 1 ounce dark chocolate 70% plus, 65 milligrams. If dietary sources are insufficient, magnesium glycinate is the most bioavailable supplemental form. I see these 3 patterns repeatedly, and every one of them has a simple correction, focusing only on what you're not eating. The majority of blood sugar management advice is restrictive. Cut this, eliminate that, avoid these foods. But restriction alone does nothing to activate the glucose disposal system inside your muscle. You can eat a perfectly low-carb diet and still have sluggish GLUT4 transporters because nothing is triggering their activation. The muscle-based approach adds rather than only subtracts. Pair your dietary choices with the activation triggers in this protocol. 2. Sitting immediately after meals. The 20 to 60 minutes after eating is your highest opportunity window for GLUT4-mediated glucose clearance. During this window, glucose is peaking in the bloodstream, and muscle is primed to receive it if you give it a contraction signal. Sitting eliminates this window completely. A 10-minute walk after eating is not a recommendation for fitness. It is a specific metabolic intervention timed to the biology of glucose clearance, expecting medication to do what only muscle can do. Metformin, GLP-1 agonists, and SGLT2 inhibitors are valuable tools in the right context, but they are not replacements for an activated glucose disposal system. Medication manages the consequence. Muscle activation addresses the mechanism. The patients who achieve the most meaningful and lasting improvements, including those who reduce or eliminate their need for medication under their doctor's supervision, are the ones who combine pharmaceutical management with the muscle-based approach. Do not stop or reduce any medication without consulting your physician, but do not assume medication alone is addressing the root issue. Type 2 diabetes is not a life sentence. It is a metabolic state, and metabolic states change. The people I've watched achieve the most meaningful turnarounds in their blood sugar are not genetically different. They are not younger. They are not exercising for hours a day. They are the ones who learned how to speak directly to the metabolic systems already inside them and started giving those systems the right inputs. The GLUT4 transporters in your muscle cells are waiting to be activated right now. The AMPK pathway is ready to respond. Your muscles can begin absorbing glucose more efficiently, starting with your very next meal, if you give them what the research shows they respond to. You are not waiting for a new drug. You are not waiting for your body to cooperate. These mechanisms exist in you right now. Today is the day you start using them. Let's lock this in. Here is everything you learned in this video. Skeletal muscle is responsible for 70 to 80% of post-meal glucose clearance. It is your primary glucose disposal organ. GLUT4 transporters are the glucose gates in your muscle cells. They can be opened without insulin via muscle contraction and specific food compounds. The AMPK pathway is your body's built-in glucose disposal switch. Berberine, cinnamon, and physical movement all activate it. Each pound of muscle tissue stores 3 to 4 grams of glucose as glycogen. More muscle means more storage capacity. Post-meal glucose improvements can begin within 1 session of applying this protocol. Days is biologically accurate. The 7-food protocol. 1. Berberine-rich foods, or barberry powder, 500 milligrams equivalent, before largest meals. 2. Ceylon cinnamon, 1 to 2 grams with your first meal. 3. Fenugreek seeds, 5 to 10 grams soaked overnight with carbohydrate-containing meals. 4. Lean protein, 25 to 30 grams per meal. Chicken, salmon, eggs, lentils. 5. Apple cider vinegar, 1 to 2 tablespoons, diluted in 8-ounce water before 2 largest meals. 6. Cooked and cooled resistant starch, potatoes or rice, refrigerated 12 plus hours, 3 to 4x per week. 7. Turmeric plus black pepper, 1 teaspoon plus 1/4 teaspoon daily for anti-inflammatory GLU-4 support. The movement trigger. 10-minute post-meal walk after your 2 largest meals. Every day. Your blood sugar is not beyond your control. The biology is on your side. These systems exist in you right now. Use them. Here's what I want you to do right now, before you close this video. Pick one item from the protocol I just gave you. Just one, and commit to applying it after your very next meal today. Not tomorrow, not after you've researched it for 2 more weeks. Today. Then drop a comment below and tell me which one you're starting with. I read every comment in this community, and I will reply. That accountability moment, telling someone you're doing it, is one of the most powerful behavioral levers in making change stick. Use it. If this video gave you a new understanding of your own body, if it shifted something for you, please share it with someone in your life who is fighting with their blood sugar right now. There are people around us who are losing this battle, not because they lack willpower, but because no one gave them this information. Be the person who does that. One last thing before I go. I get hundreds of messages every week asking which specific products to use, and I get it. The difference between a high-quality Ceylon cinnamon and the cheap cassia on grocery store shelves, or between a properly standardized berberine and a random capsule online, is significant enough to affect whether this protocol actually works for you. So I've done the work for you. In the description below, you'll find links to every product I personally use and recommend. The exact forms, the exact brands, the exact doses that match what the research I cited today was actually testing. I only put things in that list that I've vetted myself and would recommend to my own family. These are not paid placements. They are my personal picks, products I trust because the science behind them holds up. Check the description, do your own due diligence, and choose what makes sense for your situation. Like this video if the science held up for you. Subscribe if you want more of this, because next week I'm covering the overnight protocol that research shows can lower fasting glucose by morning without changing what you eat at dinner. I'll see you in that one. Dr. Leana, out.